This program was broadcasted and recorded live from the LSCR studios in downtown Conroe, Texas. Lone Star Community Radio is supported by listeners like you. Donate and sponsor today. For more information on getting involved with Lone Star Community Radio, contact us at lscrstudios@gmail.com or visit us online at www.irlonestar.com.
You're listening to Crime Scene Today. I'm your host, Dan Zentek. We talk about current issues facing law enforcement, crime scene, and forensic investigation. It's great to be back in the studio. We've had a little bit of downtime as we move to the new studio over here. So a couple of updates, just so you know, some conferences and things that are coming up related to crime scene and such. So the big IAI National or International Conference is going to be July 31st through August 6th. Registration is open for all of these conferences. Make sure that if you're going to go to any of them, you want to get your seat and get those hotels confirmed pretty quick, because I know they sell out pretty quick, and right now there's special pricing on them. The Texas division of the IAI, which is Crime Scene Organization for Texas, they're going to meet in San Antonio this year, and that's going to be June 7th through June 10th. So that's again going to be in San Antonio. That's open registration right now. If you're a member of the IAI or TDIAI, then it's cheaper for you to go, so make sure you have your membership. Tape it for your property and evidence people. That's going to be October 18th through the 21st, and that is going to be in San Marcos. So anyway, those are 3 conferences coming up. Make sure that you sign up for those and get ahead of the game so you can get the right hotel fees and such. But today we have Janet Teague as a guest who has spent a lifetime career in law enforcement. We're going to talk about some of those experiences and how that has led to a ministry and chaplain and all many things that she's done in her life following law enforcement. So Janet, welcome to the program. And so just to start with, so how long were you in law enforcement? I mean, obviously, I guess you're still involved, but overall, starting out.
Well, thank you, Dan, for the invitation. It's such an honor to be here. And so I've been in law enforcement for 30 years. And so just kind of tell you a little bit about myself. I've been married 23 years. My husband and I are pastors and founders of Hope and Healing for Warriors. And our passion is to see first responders and military win the battle against trauma. But I have served over 30 years in law enforcement, and as a police officer, I've helped people in trauma. And now I'm telling my story of being forced to confront my own trauma. My family is a family of helpers, and my husband and I, both pastors and chaplains, and we're hardwired to care for others. Our daughter shares the same passion of helping others and winning the battle against trauma. So back in 1992, I started with MCSO, and back then I was a jail deputy, then went through the academy and was promoted to patrol deputy. But one of the most memorable assignments that I had when I was promoted to community resource officer and specializing in community policing. And I remember one of the first times that I was able to meet with Captain Bill Davis and Lieutenant Ollie Coward. And they'd been in their jobs for such a long time, and they were experts in the field of community policing. And I could just sit back and just listen to them, and they told such valuable lessons of for young officers back in the day to value officers, especially senior officers. But I consider myself very blessed that I've had the opportunities in my early law enforcement career to work with some of the best in Texas, if not some of the best in the United States.
Well, we started, I guess, about close to the same time. So I graduated from the academy in 91, and I started as a reserve over at David Hill's office, Precinct 5 at the time before going to Harris County. So policing certainly was a lot different when we got into it.
Oh,
There was
absolutely.
not as much technology, I find it funny how, I'm just gonna say spoiled, that some of the new people are with things that they receive. I remember my first patrol car, had a hole in the floorboard that you could see the road as you were driving, and when it rained, I got wet, not because the window was down, but it was coming through the floorboard. Yeah, but you were happy to have that car. You were happy to be out on patrol and all that. And again, there weren't as many, so your backup was far away. You had to take on a lot of risk and things like that. One thing that brought attention, and we're going to talk about it later, but you recently authored a book. This just came out. When was this published? This year, right?
It just came out a few weeks ago.
Yeah, okay. So the Bible and the Badges, and again, we're going to talk about that later on. But one of the things that you discuss in here is your life before law enforcement, your life during law enforcement, things like that. And, you talked about being helpers and wanting to help others. And something I find very, very common in the personality of most police and paramedic and firefighters is the desire to help others. It's just sort of built in. But your history, as some others I've interviewed, also comes from a tragic event. And you talk a little bit about that. If you want to share, I guess, before you got in law enforcement, right?
Yes, sir. Absolutely, Dan.
So this was you kidnapped and all the many things that we are
Yes,
afraid
sir.
of and that we protect against, right?
Yes, sir. So, before law enforcement, when I was in my early 20s, I had pulled into a local mall parking lot, and I had recently purchased a new car and was so proud of it. It was fire engine red and had on a new pantsuit, and I just, later that day after what happened, I never wanted to see that car again.
Yeah.
I never wanted to see those clothes again. But I opened the car door to get out at the mall, and I bent down to pick up my purse, and I'm turning back. I saw a guy who was bent down with a large steel butcher knife, and approximately a 7-inch blade, and he demanded, and he said, "Move over." And he had grabbed my left arm, and he got into the vehicle with me, and we drove down I-45, and the knife was right against my left side, and he was saying, "If you try to get out, I'm going to kill you." And so as we passed other vehicles on the highway, I was praying, and I was just praying, somebody see me, somebody notice me, look what's going on. Doesn't anybody see me at all? And so we went to a rural area, and he backed into the wooded area off the road, and he was poking the knife slightly into my side, and he had actually kidnapped me at knife point against my will, and in my own car, and he sexually assaulted me, and it was all about power and all about control, and it happened at around 10 o'clock in the morning in broad daylight, and I studied his face, and I wanted to identify him, and I was praying that I would live, and there was a Bible on the dash of the car, on my car dash, and we had been having a revival at my church, and so he said, "Why is that up there?" And he threw it on the floorboard. And so I was praying, and he said, "What are you saying? What are you saying? Stop it, stop it." And he said a lot more, but it's not worth mentioning what he said. And so I was praying for the opportunity to get away. And so then it happened, he got out of the car, it happened, I had an opportunity. So I used that opportunity, and I was able to escape. And I was naked running down the road, and got into the woods.
You found out later this wasn't his only time to do this. You found out that he was serial rapist and that he had done this to
Absolutely.
others.
Absolutely, I was not the first one. And so I was running 100 miles an hour to get away, and I would stop and I'd listen, and I could hear him yelling. And so I traveled through the woods, and I actually came upon a hunting cabin, and there was a man's overall suit, and I was able to put that on. And then I came across a hayfield, and I could hear a tractor, and he was baling hay. And so I waved my arms, and he stopped the tractor. He saw me, and he helped me, and he took me up to his residence with his wife, and we called 911, and HPD came, and they had a helicopter in the air. They were trying to locate my car, to locate him. And, when I got into law enforcement, a lot of officers don't want to work these kinds of crimes. It's a hard crime to work for some officers, but because I've been through it, it helped me.
So
it helped me to help other people.
How long between, so you said you're in your 20s, so how long from your assault before you got into law enforcement?
It was a few years after that, sir. So I did have a few years. When I first applied in law enforcement, I applied at HPD,
Right.
and I wasn't tall enough, and I didn't weigh enough.
Right.
And so I had to wait until some changes were made.
I'll tell you what, they don't care how tall or what you weigh now. They just need people. So,
Yes, sir.
So your first time, like everybody, you went to the jail, I gather, right, before hitting the streets.
Yes, sir.
And something you talk about, and I know is dear to your heart and your husband's, as far as the trauma that's inflicted. And obviously, you had a physical along with mental trauma prior to you even getting in this. And y'all talk about PTSD, and it's strange that it's sort of I'd say a new topic when it comes to law enforcement, right? We've been talking about it with military for years, right? People coming back from war, and the basic definition that we have and that we've been taught for PTSD is either some extreme stressful event, either one event can cause it, or what we have now, identified dealing with law enforcement is the accumulation of whether it's small or big stressful events over the course of your whole career of steadily experiencing these things. And as I said, it's something new in the sense that I know, not even 5 years ago, that if you had a bad scene or whatever, I think we sort of went through stages of getting better at it, right? It was like, you had hey, if you're having trouble, go talk to someone who was there. They can possibly relate. Now, prior to that, it was just, suck it up. You signed up for this, right? So at least that has sort of changed. But I think that we're always told when you go in the academy that, your life's going to change, right? Things are going to be different. I don't think anybody can truly explain what that means, right? I can tell you that just my own experiences of raising children and dealing with homicide and violent crimes and all these things, and my friends that do the same thing, that, and I'm only gathering it's because of what we experienced, but I mean, when my child calls and says they're filling up with gas, I would gather a normal parent just thinks, great. I think about what you described, right? Are you being safe? Are you watching out? Is someone going to grab you or whatever?
Absolutely.
Someone's 10 minutes late coming home, you think of the worst because, and I sort of give the description that horror movies have nothing on what we have in our head, right? We can come up with so much more of what would scare anybody because of just the soundtrack and the video track that we have from the many things we've seen and done, right? And it seems as though, again, y'all are sort of approaching that issue and making it more normal, right, in the field to try to talk about these things.
Absolutely.
I know you talk about a few in your book, But what would you say, and I mean, as I said, I know that it's many over the course of things, is there anything that I would say really sticks out with you, an event that still, I won't say that you're having trouble with, but like it's that one that, sticks out. I've had people that, and this is the one thing that also about that is there's so many times, like you and I could go to a scene together. It may not bother you at all on that scene. There's just something about it, that may bother me. And we go to a different scene and it bothers you, it doesn't bother me. It's, sometimes it's a connection. I've seen one common thing is when we're dealing with child crimes, the closer that your children are to the age of the person you're dealing with, there's usually a connection and stuff. I would have to say one of mine is not scenes. I've worked many cases, many deaths. I've told many parents as far as that their children are dead. I put babies in body bags, but the one that sticks with me is when one of my deputies in Harris County was hit and getting him out the car, and the last person to be there. But so what is that one?
Well, Dan, back in 1994, I was working patrol and I was in a marked unit, and shortly after the patrol shift began, I stopped at the Shell station on I-45, and I intended on picking up a cold drink, and I would routinely check in there on a female clerk that there'd been some recent crimes there, and the manager's name that she had a nickname, we called her Cricket, and so Cricket introduced me to a new female employee that was just started working there that very day, and little did I know that this incident would change my life forever. And she told me her name, and we'll call her Miss Smith, that she had requested a work transfer because of her soon-to-be ex-husband had a history of repeated domestic violence, and several attacks had been reported to HPD. And Smith told me that she had been separated several months ago and that she had moved into her parents' house in Houston for safety. And she said that her husband had an addiction to crack cocaine and that he had hurt her so many times, and that he had escalated and was telling her that he was going to kill her with death threats if she didn't go back with him. And so she pulled out her wallet and she showed me his photo, and she also showed me pictures of her two young children. And she believed that she did not think that he knew where she had been transferred to work. And she told me that this was the anniversary of the death of her older sister, this very day was. And I took down all of her information, and her demeanor was so calm, and she asked me if I'd be very careful if our paths crossed, that she was concerned about me. And she went on to ask me, she said, "Do you know Jesus is your Savior?" And I affirmed her, yes, that I did. And little did I know that this was one of the last things she was going to say, one of the last things that would come out of her mouth. And so I told her that I'd be passing this information on to MCSO, and that I'd be staying close by and as much as I could possible on my shift, and that I'd be passing all the information on for others as well. And I told her, call 911. If something happens, be sure and call 911. And I left the location, and I was going to circle the area, and I was watching for the subject, and within 2 to 3 minutes, I got the call. And so I received the dispatch that there was an armed robbery at that location, and dispatch said the suspect had come to the counter and pulled a gun from a revolver from behind his waistband, and he had taken the clerk into the storage room at gunpoint, and that the lady at the counter was bent down behind the counter speaking to dispatch. And so I arrived in less than 2 minutes, and I didn't observe any vehicles on location. And I entered the store with my weapon was drawn, and I saw Cricket was behind the counter on the phone, and she was pointing to the back room, to the stock room, and she was whispered that 2 shots fired. And so I continued to the storeroom, where I observed that Mrs. Smith was lying on the floor, fatally shot in the head. And the subject, later identified as Mr. Smith, was also lying on the floor, and that he had shot himself in the head. And the gun was lying next to the subject. According to the manager, Cricket, she could only watch in horror as he took Mrs. Smith at gunpoint to the storage room. And so both had died on the scene. And I requested crime scene and supervisor and to the incident, and I was just furious. I was just so furious at myself that she could die like this. And I didn't sleep well for a while, wishing that I could have stopped it. In my prayer, I asked God, why did her life have to be taken? Why, Lord, did it have to be this way? And why was I the one on this call? And I later heard a voice in my heart say, if not you, then who? And I was heartbroken, and I still put on the uniform and still went on my shifts. And I carried a lot of weight for a while from that. And, you know, sometimes it's okay to cry. It is okay to cry. And it's okay not to fight those tears. And don't try not to be strong when you're not. And there's healing in this story. For many people, there's healing in this story. So there's been many, many times that I've told this story in church classes, and it's touched so many lives. And you just never know that when you talk to someone that could be your last words that you hear from them, and how these words could affect someone else.
Well, and as you said, I think one of the things that, again, there's no rhyme or reason on why one scene bothers another, but the common link that I've found in many is that emotional connection. The fact that you knew her, the fact that you had seen her kids, that you'd had private conversations, and it's one of the things that I've seen as also a common among the homicide detectives, and speaking to many all over the nation. Many of us enjoy our job, enjoy what we do, and some people ask, how do you enjoy doing that, right? Well, there's a common part of it. Going to the scene and processing it, using all your talents and abilities and training, that's the fun part, right? But every single one that I know, every single homicide detective I know, will always say the one part of the job they hate is the same thing, and it is always dealing with the family, because there's that emotional connection, right? Me dealing with a scene, that's evidence, okay? That's me tracking a bad guy. That's me going and doing my job, okay? And the way I've described it, and me and my partner at the time, we would just take turns. And believe me, it was not like, hey, I want to do this. It was, it's your turn to do this, right? And the best that I describe it is when your child is born, that there's like this invisible umbilical cord, okay? That you're always connected. You're always worried. You always are glad their accomplishments. There's just this connection that cannot be described except for that you have with your child. And what we do is we go and cut that umbilical cord, because the moment that we arrive at that place and time, everything is still normal. After I say these words, your life will never be normal again. So those, again, that's the hard part, is any type of emotional connection that you have to that individual, because you can take that same thing and of course relate it to your life, of your children, of your things that you're going through. And again, that's where I think a lot of the PTSD that you deal with is dealing with that over and over. And whether it is homicide investigators, whether it is patrol officers, many of them have to go give death notifications. But again, it's dealing with that emotional connection. Now, and by no means am I dismissing the other side of PTSD, people getting in gunfights of the highest stress level of fighting for their own lives, all of those. But it's this high stress that is unresolved, right? You don't have time to resolve it before you're going to your next call and your next call. And so you find some way to deal with it, which is how we get our very dark humor, and it's our way of laughing. It's our way of dealing with things and talking to people who have been through it. And actually, my wife, who did not come from law enforcement, she noticed something after the first couple of years together. At first, she realized how close the police family was and didn't understand why until after watching us through the years, that no one else can understand what you're doing, what you've gone through, what you experienced. So, but that goes to your point of these conversations, to be strong in your conversations, which sort of leads to your next mission that you've sort of taken on is the PTSD. So what started, I guess, you identifying these issues and then to bring to light, trying to bring people together to address this?
Well, Dan, the reason what motivated me to write this book was this is a true life story. And it's about my career in law enforcement and how my faith in God has led me into law enforcement in the beginning and calling me later to another calling, which was the ministry. And the stories in the book tell about many threatening situations that I've experienced and how it made my faith even stronger, and it led me to reach out to others who have experienced in their own traumas by offering help and actually starting a warrior's ministry. So about 3 years ago, when I was going through seminary to become a minister, it was put into my heart to write this book, and with the goal in my heart and desire to open the eyes of others about the trauma that's behind our badges, the trauma that's behind our uniforms. So I made time and I set aside 5 weeks last summer to write the book. And it took approximately 10 months to get it published. And in the book, it's just brutally honest with frontline stories of the most dangerous and the worst situation that others, they just can't comprehend, that we run to these dangers, and we find ourselves in the position to help because God is actually answering someone's prayers through us. This book will help police officers, in addition, military, firefighters, first responders, and those that are traumatized, and also it helps their families. And I've become an advocate for PTSD awareness and PTSI awareness, and currently a pastor and a minister at Hope and Healing for Warriors, and a chaplain for MCSO, and Justice Court JP1. And our ministry is for anyone that's been through trauma, and it's also for their families.
And you talked a little bit as far as the chaplain program. I know that that's grown. I know that the current HC I'm at, we have a chaplain also, and has assisted. One of the things, and you can speak certainly much deeper to it, but one of the things that certainly assisted us is we're on scene as detectives. We have a job to do, and which is dealing with evidence in the crime versus dealing with the emotional, spiritual needs of the family, right? So, we've had many that responded to that, and I know that that's grown. So how long is the chaplaincy program? I know that they've had this, but this has grown into something huge at the JP's office and SO. I know that there's from many faiths and many people involved in this. When did all that sort of?
Well, Dan, to tell you a little bit about chaplaincy and how it began, and for generations, chaplains have stood by the sides of men in combat around the world, and in the United States. And chaplains are traced all the way back to the battlefields of the American Revolutionary War, and again in the Civil War, in World War I, World War II. And they're called upon as well during even the Korean War. But, you know, little is known about the chaplains of law enforcement unless, of course, you are in law enforcement. And I serve a chaplain at both places, MCSO and JP1, and I'm happy to serve. It's an honor and to serve both the employees and the public when I'm given the opportunity. But I cannot comment on anything specific because there's confidentiality
Sure, of course.
Issues, and I'm unable, Dan, to be a spokesman about chaplaincy. But if anyone has specific questions about the program, I need to refer them to the media team at
Sure.
MCSO.
But how long you been doing that?
2 years.
Couple of years now?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
So from that, and obviously being quiet up to this point, but we have your husband over here. So from that, y'all created Hope and Healing for Warriors.
Correct.
Okay, so tell me sort of how that came about and what that is.
Well, actually, we started it almost 6 years ago.
Okay.
And I'm a combat veteran, Vietnam, which, like you guys, we didn't get any publicity. They didn't know what we had. In fact, most of them didn't like us,
Right.
you know, for being in that war. So, in my own heart, I knew we needed to do something for these young guys that were coming home. They're taught to be the best warriors we have, and then they're discarded. And they have issues. Some, you know, they're used to being, their house payments are made, their health benefits are there, and all of a sudden now they have to survive in the world that they haven't been in. Most of them are kids.
Right. If you needed something, we issued it to you.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly correct. And so I felt the need God put on my heart, and you think this wasn't hard, and God does have a sense of humor, because to me, I was jealous and angry at these kids getting all the publicity that we didn't get.
Right.
You know, so when God put it on my heart, I said, God, you got to be talking about the wrong person. I'm not the one to do this.
Right. And so y'all started this about 6 years ago.
About 6 years ago.
And so this is not just veterans, though,
No, sir. No,
right?
sir.
This who all does this reach out to?
It's police officers, firefighters, first responders. In fact, I do confidential counseling with police officers, as you were talking about, because they don't want the stigma of the PTSD, but they want someone to talk to get it off their mind, you know, off their chest. And so I have the privilege and honor to deal with some of them.
Well, and I even noticed in going through that, you know, again, some of the first comments people make is, you know, you talk to people on scene, you have your you know, deconfliction, decompression, you know, whatever they like to refer to it as, the post-op talk, you know, but those are all people involved, and sometimes that is good. And most places I know of have their emergency assistance program, but from what I've heard from most people when they go through that, it's maybe if there's nothing else, it's a great start of someone to talk to. But usually a person on the other end has no clue, you know, as to experiences or otherwise. I'm not saying they're not trained professionals and certainly good at their jobs, just that you're not talking to someone who understands or have been there.
You're exactly right. Exactly.
You know, so this is something different than that, obviously. So if someone is out there, so what is the process in being involved with y'all's ministry of Hope and Healing?
We have confidential meetings every Wednesday night, and all are invited, and they can talk and say exactly what they feel, and it stays in that room. And there's others there with the same issues, and we have military police officers, we have a battalion chief, firefighter. I mean, we've got the gamut.
And where does this occur?
At Lone Star Cowboy Church.
Okay, and now, is this Montgomery?
Yes, sir, Montgomery.
Okay, and so obviously, you know, this is geared towards military and law enforcement, fire, you know, all the first responder type thing. As far as, are y'all dealing with I guess, the change with, we're dealing with changes in age. We talk millennial, we talk about, the different age groups and whatever. Is that represented? I guess, in other words, you got this young guy coming in that's going to go, well, he doesn't know anything. He's just this old person, right? Is there a gamut, I guess, of resources?
Well, there is, and we happen to be on the board of Tri-County Advisory Board, Mental Health, and so we have a lot of help from there. But to address your one point there, they do look at this as the old guy, but when they sit down and talk to you, they know what you're talking about. You've been there, you've done that, just like with police officers.
Right.
So they seem to open up after a while. Sometimes it takes a little while to make that connection. But not only are we limited to police officers, firefighters, and military, we have women that have gone through the same thing my wife has gone through. We have childhood, problems and issues that they've gone through. So we're not just limited. I mean, we've opened it up, and God has blessed us with this ministry to be quite large. And it's just opened up doors in every direction.
And so, Janet, just speaking to some current issues in law enforcement, and one you sort of address as far as we're losing a lot of people to retirement. We're losing a lot of people, and people are not busting down the door to become police officers right now. I think that's very specific to areas. I mean, obviously we see a national media that is there to get attention, right? I mean, whatever, if it can get a click, if it can get a headline or whatever, that's more sensationalized. And we see a lot of those places up north that are having severe problems. I don't see the same problems here, but we see the same, I guess, issues with people wanting to be cops. So, you got just as much time as I do in law enforcement. What are your thoughts on, I guess, solving that, reaching out or somehow getting people interested in law enforcement?
Well, Dan, I am so thankful that I live in Montgomery County, and I'm in Texas, but specifically in Montgomery County, and working in law enforcement here. And we're different here. It is a group that is premier, and in law enforcement, we got into law enforcement to protect and to help everyone, and we're trying to maintain this persona of being, the protector. And there's a lot of times that we don't want to admit the things that bother us, and so we need to progress along in our career from going from call to call to call, and to where we can talk to someone. And so what's happening that I can see in law enforcement in our area is there's more and more chaplains that are coming in to help others, to help law enforcement. And so and also people used to think that they just didn't have anyone to talk to in law enforcement, and where do they turn? What are they going to do? And that it is a sign of being strong. It's not a sign of being weak to call out for help. And so, and now in law enforcement, there's also the buddy check systems, so that there's others, whether it's someone that you're working directly with or a chaplain, where you can reach out and others will talk to you and say, well, how's your day going, and is there anything too heavy for you, and what kind of calls are you going on, and so I feel like that there is a lot of people that are retiring across the nation out of law enforcement, but what I can see is there's also men and women that are being drawn into law enforcement as well, even during these times.
The one thing that I sort of find odd, and I'm hoping that it sort of changes, or maybe your thoughts on it, is there are only two things I know of. If you're involved in a shooting, you have to go talk to somebody. And if you work child sex crimes, you have a yearly psychological checkup also, if you're dealing with child porn and things like that. But those are the only two things I know that are pretty standard in our industry, that if those two things happen, then you're mandated. You're going to go talk to somebody, right? But it seems to be missing a whole lot of other things that go on. And I think that when there is a big event, they'll usually have a gathering, just a post gathering to sort of discuss the event. But I don't think it really occurs that often or as much to all the other, I wouldn't say small, but events that do you think it has come to a point that it should be general practice that there's just this mental health, wellness check-in, whether it's yearly, whether it's a couple years or whatever?
Absolutely, Dan. And, I've seen men and women die from everything imaginable, by automobile accidents, where they were in pieces, where others have been murdered. I've seen people in stages after death, and the sights that we see, the things that I've experienced and been exposed to on the job, they're not special. There's so many out there that are suffering. They're suffering in silence because they're afraid to ask for help. And even when you think you have had an idea of what in law enforcement that you're going to see or what you're going to do, you still are not totally prepared. And trauma, Dan, changes our lives. And you pay a price. You may put up walls to keep yourself from going crazy. You may learn that you cannot give in and display your emotions because you're in law enforcement. And as difficult as this job can be at times, it's all worth it in the end when we're getting to have a part of helping others and making the community a safer place. No matter how hard it gets, this job is a rewarding career. And, yes, I'm absolutely honored to be in the ministry, to be in chaplaincy, and to help and encourage and support warriors to find strength to make connections to change their lives. But, they don't need to suffer in silence. There's people that can help if they call out.
I think that, two things is one, there's the old adage of you being felt as though you're weak for coming, right? But, I think there's another one that sort of gets ignored, and that is we sometimes think or we feel as though, everybody understands that everybody's doing the same job, right? And, one example sort of sticks out to me on how unaware we are that everybody is going through the same thing is I was in a class with Colonel Grossman speaking, and he did an exercise. And there's everybody in this class from county, city, state, and everybody dealing in law enforcement. There's at least 300-400 in the class. And he had everybody close their eyes. And he said, raise your hand if you've ever had a dream where you are trying to shoot somebody and you are not hitting them or your gun's not going off or whatever. So raise your hand. He said, now keep your hands raised and open your eyes. Every single person in that room, everyone has their hand up. And again, it was just that reminder that everyone is experiencing the same thing, but we don't realize it. We may know that we're going call to call to call, but you don't realize that they're feeling the same way. They're having the same dreams. They're having the same nightmares, okay? And I think acknowledging not just that we do the same job, but that, I don't know another way to put it, but this is normal, right? I mean, this is the normal consequence of the job that you're doing.
Absolutely.
Right? So getting them to understand that part, that, I mean, I don't know where to put it, but you're not special. You're not unique, okay? I mean, this is everybody who decides to do this. The one who I guess is unique is the one who doesn't have this, and I have yet to find them. Okay, if I do, I'm more concerned about them being like a psychopath with no emotion and no impact on their life or whatever. But I think that's a very hard message to get across unless you talk, unless you're sharing those experiences, that these are things I'm thinking about, these are things that bother me, these are dreams I'm having, these are issues that, you do think you're alone. You think you're paranoid when it comes to your kids. You think that, the nightmares you're having is just because of this one incident. Then you talk to others and realize, nope, this is a normal part of the job. I hate to say it as that, but that's what it comes down to, right? Yeah. So with, again, sort of getting back to y'all's solution for this, right, and what y'all combined. So where do you see, I guess, the next steps of your ministry or of Hope and Healing or something beyond Hope and Healing? What do you see?
Well, our goals are about providing an avenue for individuals that have trauma, to have someone to reach out to. And a lot of people think that they do not have anyone to talk to, and where are they going to turn when they don't want to talk to? Think that others may think they're weak. And so, PTSD isn't about what's wrong with you. It's about what happened to you. And at Hope and Healing for Warriors, we encourage and we support warriors to find strength to make those connections that will change their lives. And our ministry is not only one that's very unique, but one that it's mostly desperately needed, especially in today's world with all that's going on. And these are dangerous times, and officers feel that it's dangerous times. And so all three of the pastors, there's one that's not here, Tom Ramey, we're all board certified mental health coaches, behavior coaches, and Tri-County Military Peer Network. And my husband also has a PTSI certificate. So we want to let others out there know you're not alone. No one is ever too broken or too scared or too far gone to go through the change. Never stop fighting. Don't lose your fight. There's someone here to help, and we're so happy to be here to help.
So you referred to PTSD, and that's pretty common. People know. So explain PTSI.
It's a new, for the family side of it, like you said, your wife finally noticed a change a couple of years later. A lot of them find the change, and they have compound PTSD, which is they picked up the same thing, only it's from being around you. And so they don't know how to handle it. So that's how we've taken in the families to try to help them.
So where do you see, so obviously y'all are in Montgomery.
Yes, sir.
Sort of taking care of this area. So how do we get it beyond Montgomery?
That's a good question. We've been looking at that. We've been asked to open a place in Dallas. Again, it's finding the right people. The key to PTSD is someone to listen.
Sure.
And that's a hard thing to find, and someone that can actually relate. And so we're not quite ready to the point where we can go look for somebody else to do it. So we're going to try to expand. We have done some Zoom and had them in our classes. So we really don't know, to answer your question, exactly how we're going to expand it.
You want to get there.
Yes, sir.
Just not sure how we're going to accomplish that yet, right?
Exactly, yes, sir.
We're getting calls from all over the United States, from everywhere, for help. So people are finding us.
Well, and it's obviously impactful that I'm sure, as confidential as it is, the one thing I've learned is that when people do receive help, many want to share that they're feeling better, right? And when they share that story, then that obviously is a built-in message for y'all and expanding those things, right? So if someone wants to help, if someone wants to get in touch with y'all for where, how do they get in touch with you, besides just showing up on a Wednesday night?
We've got a web page.
Okay, what's the web page?
www.hopeandhealingforwarriors.com.
Okay, and you have emails on there, contacts on there?
All the information's on
So,
there. And Janet's on Facebook, as you know, so all the information's on Facebook also.
Yep, and so if you want to find information, you can go to the website, and then also, by all means, we have the book, The Bible and the Badges, Blessed are the Peacemakers, just came out just a couple weeks ago, and I know you can find it on Amazon. That's where I bought mine. So you can go and check that out. And
It's actually at all bookstores now.
it is hit the bookstore. See, I try to just have stuff delivered to the house. I don't.
It's an ebook also.
So there, any place you find a book, you should be able to find this book. So, well, Janet, I appreciate you being here. And
Yes, sir, it's an
Ray, I
honor.
appreciate you being here. Thank y'all so much for sharing your story. Thank you for writing your book, and certainly for the continued work that y'all are doing for all the first responders out there, and sharing all your experiences to help them along the way. So